My daughter booked the next available flight to Thailand the morning she saw the photograph. She didn't call first. By the time Heather landed in Chiang Mai, she had already forwarded the image to her brother Ian 3 times and read 2 articles about older foreign men being deceived through traditional Thai ceremonies. When she arrived at my apartment just after noon, she didn't hug me at the door. She looked past my shoulder and asked who the woman placing a jasmine garland around my neck was, and why I was dressed in white. That was not how I expected to greet my daughter after 7 months apart. My name is Alan. I was 67 years old, a retired electrician from Kelowna, British Columbia, and I had been living alone since Eleanor passed away 2.5 years before I left for Thailand. My wife and I had met in Kamloops when we were both in our 20s, moved to Kelowna when the children were small, and built the kind of life that looked, from the outside, as though it had everything a person could need. After Eleanor died, Heather called from Vancouver every few days. Ian drove down from Calgary 3 or 4 times a year. They included me in holidays, in birthday dinners, in a Canada Day camping trip the first summer after my wife was gone. My grandchildren were young enough that they still ran toward me when I arrived. I was surrounded by people who loved me, and I was grateful for every one of them. But love does not fill a weekday morning. It does not fill the hour after supper when the house is quiet, and there is no one to tell about the small, useless things that happen during the day. I was retired. I had no projects left that felt urgent. I drove to Tim Hortons in the morning, not because I was particularly hungry, but because sitting at a counter with strangers nearby felt less empty than sitting at my own kitchen table. Most days I took the long route home, through the neighborhood instead of along the main road, not because the scenery was better, but because getting back meant admitting that nothing was waiting for me. There is a difference between being loved from a distance and being needed where you stand. My children saw a paid-off house, a reliable pension, and a man who appeared to be managing. They did not see me. I had been watching videos about Chiang Mai for almost a year before I mentioned it to anyone. I had passed through Bangkok decades earlier on a job that had taken me briefly into Southeast Asia, and I had never quite forgotten the quality of the streets there, the noise, the density, the sense that something was always happening just around the corner. After Eleanor died, I found myself watching footage of Chiang Mai the way some people watch the Weather Channel, not for information, but for the comfort of movement. When I finally told Heather and Ian I was considering a longer stay in Thailand, Heather's first question was whether I had met someone online. Ian asked whether I had spoken to my doctor. Neither of them said no outright. They asked me to wait 3 months before deciding. I waited 6, and then I went. I was careful about it. I rented my house in Kelowna through a property management company rather than selling it. I kept my Canadian bank account active and established a separate Thai account funded by a single monthly transfer. I maintained my travel health insurance, which covered medical evacuation. I gave Heather and Ian the name of my building, my apartment number, and the contact information for the building manager. I was not disappearing. I was trying something different, while my body still cooperated well enough to try it. My first few weeks in Chiang Mai were genuinely disorienting. The heat was unlike anything I had experienced in the Okanagan, not simply warm, but present, as though the air itself had weight. I could not read a single sign. I could not count the coins quickly enough at market stalls. I overpaid for things constantly and got turned around on streets that all looked similar to me at first. But I kept going outside. That was the single rule I made for myself. Every day, regardless of how lost I felt, I would leave the apartment and go somewhere. I found a morning noodle stall 2 streets from my building that opened at 5 in the morning. I ate there every day until the woman running it began ladling my bowl before I had finished paying. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. After 2 years of feeling invisible in a city where I had lived for 30 years, having someone expect me in the morning felt like oxygen. I met Somchai 6 weeks after I arrived. He was a retired school principal, 62 years old, with the kind of quiet patience that I imagined came from decades of handling difficult situations without raising his voice. He spoke formal, deliberate English and seemed genuinely interested in practicing it. We started talking at a cafe near the old city walls, where a regular mix of local retirees and foreign residents gathered in the mornings. And we talked the way two men with nowhere urgent to be will sometimes talk, slowly, at length, about everything and nothing. Somchai introduced me to his wife Nong not long after. She was small and precise and ran a seamstress business from their home and had clear opinions about most things and no particular interest in softening them. I liked her immediately. She reminded me of Eleanor in the best possible way. Their family began including me in things: Sunday lunches, a neighborhood temple fair, a merit-making ceremony at a local school where the community was honoring a group of retiring teachers. At that ceremony, students had made garlands from fresh jasmine and marigold. Somchai's nephew was among them. When the boy spotted me at the edge of the courtyard, he said something to Somchai in Thai. And Somchai turned to me and explained that the boy wanted to know whether I would accept a garland too, because I had been helping his class with English conversation every Thursday afternoon. I had started volunteering at the school almost by accident. Somchai had mentioned they were looking for native English speakers to work informally with students preparing for tourism and hospitality work. I had said yes, mostly because Thursday afternoons had felt very long, and I had run out of ways to fill them. But I kept going back because the students were genuinely curious, and because there is something clarifying about being useful to someone who has no reason to pretend you are. I did not think to explain most of this to Heather or Ian in any particular detail. I told them I was keeping busy. I told them I had made a friend. Then, 3 days after the ceremony, I posted a photograph on Facebook without thinking much about it, a candid shot that Somchai's daughter had taken. Me in a simple white shirt I had bought at the market because the ceremony required pale colors, standing among Thai families in an open courtyard with jasmine garlands bright at my collar and Nong laughing beside me with her arm through mine. Heather saw it within the hour. There was something else I had not told them. 2 months earlier, I had come off my scooter on a wet road near the night market. Nothing broke. I bruised my shoulder badly enough that I spent a week moving carefully and avoiding reaching above chest height. Somchai had driven me to the hospital. I was examined, given anti-inflammatory medication, and told to rest. By the time I was moving normally again, I had decided there was no point worrying my children about something that was already resolved. That was a mistake I understood too late. When Heather stood in my doorway asking about the woman in the garland photograph, her voice was controlled in the specific way I remembered from when she was a teenager, trying not to show that something had hurt her. I explained the ceremony. I explained who Somchai was, who Nong was, what the school was, what the students were practicing for. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked whether I had given the family money. I said no. She asked whether Nong had ever entered my apartment alone. I said no. She asked whether I had signed anything or made changes to my accounts. By the third question, I had stopped being patient. I told her I had managed my own finances, filed my own taxes, and made my own decisions without supervision since before she was old enough to understand what an RRSP was. She said she wasn't questioning my capabilities. She said she was frightened. I said there was a strange way to show it. Ian called from Calgary that same evening. He had spent the flight researching every concern that came to mind. He asked the same questions Heather had asked, then added several more. He asked whether my lease was in writing, whether my travel insurance was still current, and then, quietly, he asked who had a key to my apartment. When I told him that Somchai and Nong had a spare key, that I had given it to them after Somchai had come to check on me following the scooter accident, and found the door locked. The line went very quiet. Heather learned about the accident from Ian the following morning. She appeared in my kitchen doorway while I was making coffee with the expression of someone who has just confirmed the thing they had feared most. She was not angry. That was worse. She was frightened in the way people are frightened when they believe they have been right all along. I explained again that the injury had been minor, that I had been treated promptly, that Somchai had waited at the hospital until I was released and had driven me home. She said that was exactly the part that troubled her, that Somchai had been the one there, knowing what had happened, while she and Ian were in Canada knowing nothing. She said she didn't understand why I would go to that length to keep something from them. I did not have a good answer. The honest answer was that I had not wanted them to use it as evidence, and I knew how that sounded. Ian flew in on a Tuesday evening. The three of us sat together in my apartment with the ceiling fan turning and the street noise coming through the window, and very little to say that didn't immediately become an argument. Ian had accessed my Service Canada information and had brought notes. I showed him everything: my CPP deposit, my OAS, my RRIF withdrawal, my Thai account records, my lease, my insurance certificate, the hospital receipt which showed treatment totaling 1,200 baht, approximately 45 Canadian dollars. He went through all of it slowly. When he was done, he said the numbers looked reasonable. I could see he had expected something different. Heather said finances were not the reason she had come. That night, while Ian was asleep in my bedroom and I was on the pullout, I heard Heather step out to the balcony. She stayed there a while. In the morning, she came and sat beside me before Ian was awake. She was holding her phone, and something about the way she held herself was different. Not softer exactly, but less defended, as though something had shifted. She showed me the screen. Nong had found her through Facebook and sent a message directly. It was brief. Nong wrote that she hoped Heather would forgive the intrusion. She wrote that she wanted Heather to know that her father talked about both of his children every time he came for Sunday lunch. She said she understood why Heather was afraid. Then she wrote, "We have not tried to take your place. We have only tried to make sure he is not alone when you cannot be here. That is all. I hope you will believe me." Heather put her phone face down on her knee and didn't say anything. I told her about the last year of Eleanor's illness, about the months when Heather had driven down from Vancouver on her days off to sit with us and take care of things I hadn't known how to ask anyone else to do. I told her I had watched my daughter carry something during that time, that I had never asked her to carry, and that I had never stopped knowing the weight of it. I told her that leaving for Thailand had nothing to do with anything she had or hadn't done. I told her that I had needed to find out who I was when I wasn't Eleanor's husband, or Heather and Ian's father, or the grandfather who showed up at occasions. I had needed something that belonged to me. She wiped her face and asked whether I was actually happy here. I said yes, not every minute, not every day, but more often than I had been for a long time. That afternoon I took both my children to the school. The Thursday session was that day. I introduced them to 7 students between the ages of 16 and 18 who were preparing for work in hotels and tourism. The students asked Ian about Calgary. They asked Heather whether Canadian winters were really as severe as they had heard. Heather told them about the winter we had nearly 2 meters of snow in December, which she embellished slightly, and the whole room laughed. I watched my daughter laugh with teenagers she had met 12 minutes earlier, and I thought, this is what I have been trying to explain. One of the older students, a girl named Fern who wanted to work in hospitality and who had a particular gift for formal phrasing, thanked Heather afterward for letting her father keep coming on Thursdays. Heather said she was beginning to understand why he did. That evening Somchai and Nong had us for dinner. There was no performance prepared. There was pork and sticky rice and a clear soup I had eaten at their table many times. Ian helped Somchai fix a latch on the back garden gate. Heather sat with Nong and looked through photographs on Nong's phone. Ordinary family pictures, the kind that pile up over years without anyone planning them. I sat on the low front step and watched a gecko cross the wall above the door and thought about a night 3 years ago in my kitchen in Kelowna when the house was completely quiet and I had run out of reasons to go to bed. I would not have believed, that night, that this evening existed somewhere in my future. On the walk home, Ian said he had arrived expecting to find something wrong. He said he had come prepared to help me pack. He said what he had found was a life that was smaller in certain ways and larger in others, and that he wasn't sure he had the right word for the difference. Heather stopped outside my building and looked up at the facade for a moment. She said the traffic in this neighborhood was too unpredictable, and the streets too narrow for someone who was going to need more assistance as the years went on. I said she was probably right. She said she hated being this far away. I said I understood that, and I meant it. She asked me to promise that I would call them when something happened, not after, not once it was resolved, when. I said yes. I meant it differently than I would have a week earlier. We spent the last evening making practical changes. Ian helped me research ground-floor apartments in a quieter district with better street access. Heather put together a document with my insurance information, my hospital records, my blood type, the building manager's number, Somchai's number, and the address and phone number of the clinic where my regular doctor worked. We scheduled a standing group video call for Sunday evenings, rotating who initiated it. Heather saved Nong's number in her phone and labeled it with Nong's name. At the airport the next morning, I held my daughter longer than usual. Ian said he wanted to come back, not to check on me, to visit. After they cleared security, I walked back through the terminal and out into the Chiang Mai morning. The heat was already settling in. Somchai had sent a message saying he would be at the cafe if I wanted company. Nong had left a voice note asking whether my children had eaten enough before they left. 8 months earlier, standing alone in a public space had felt like confirmation that I had made a mistake somewhere. That morning it felt like what it was, a pause between one part of the day and the next. 3 weeks later I moved into a ground-floor apartment in a quieter neighborhood closer to Somchai and Nong. It had better light, a safer bathroom floor, and a second room with enough space for family when they came. Heather flew back in November with the grandchildren. Ian came at Christmas with his partner. The Sunday calls became a fixed part of my week. Sometimes Heather chatted with Nong after I passed the phone over. Sometimes Ian asked Somchai for restaurant recommendations. My children had crossed an ocean because they believed I had disappeared into something they couldn't see. What they found was a life they hadn't known to look for, not because I had hidden it out of defiance, but because I hadn't understood yet that letting them see it was part of protecting it. I had been so intent on guarding my independence that I had forgotten to share it. The answer was not for me to return to Kelowna. The answer was also not to keep treating every worried question as an attack. It was an honest phone call when something went wrong. It was a safer apartment. It was the willingness to let the two parts of my life, the one thousands of kilometers away and the one I had built here, learn to coexist in the same conversation. Growing older requires a kind of honesty that I was not prepared for. It asks you to be clear about what you need and equally clear about what you are not willing to surrender. Those two things are not easy to hold at the same time. But keeping the people who love you from the truth does not protect them. It only gives their fear more space to fill. My children came to Thailand to bring me home. They left having helped me make the home I had already started worth keeping.